The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to Aging Like a Badass. I'm Kimberly Price, your 40-something host, and I'm on a mission to create the trusted spaces to help you navigate life's wrinkles. Hide from uncomfortable conversations? Not a chance. The raw and real is the rocket fuel that ignites change, and there is no better time than the present to excavate the messy and activate your inner superpower to create a life you love. So stick around and get ready to learn the tips, tricks, and truths to age like a badass, because wrinkles aren't the problem, they're the solution. Welcome back to Aging Like a Badass. I'm your host, Kimberly Price. Today, we are going to talk about money. I know for some of you, this will be an exciting topic to dive into, relationships with money, the intricacy of the energy behind money that we both have, both negatively and positively. And some of you, it's going to be a terrifying topic, but we're going to take you to all the fun places. And I have special guest Mariah Raynor, she's all the way from Tampa. She's a dog mama. Her little puppy's name is Risotto, and we talked about having him on today. He will not be joining us, but maybe that's something we can do in the future. She's a certified financial coach and a life coach, and I'm excited to have you here today, Mariah.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. I kind of wish we had Risotto here.
I mean, I can make it happen if you really want, but Risotto likes to bark and make lots of noise.
Of course. Well, I'm excited to talk about, so we have the title for the love of money. And, money is either one of those, really great topics people get excited about, or it's a topic that they avoid like the plague. Do you ever find there's any middle in the topic of money?
I do. I think that I've seen that certain conversations around money sometimes is what people maybe are a little bit resistant to. And then other topics with money maybe are more comfortable. So I think it really just depends on you and your relationship with money.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I don't expect you to have this answer. Okay. I don't even know that if we Googled it, we could find a consistent answer on this. Mm-hmm. But if we looked at statistically a number of individuals that had a good relationship with money, a positive relationship with money, from the standpoint of use, saving, just all around good. Do you know statistically, roughly, is it 50-50? Is it 75-50? Is it 25-75? Where would you say that most people stand with their relationship with money? And you could give your opinion, right?
Yes. That's what literally I was going to say. I'm like, I don't know statistically, but I think that because relationship is so unique for each individual person, and each individual person would define the relationship with money or another human so differently, that I don't know that there's a statistic out there. But even just people in my day-to-day life, friends, family members, people that I used to be coworkers with, I feel like there's always room to grow and improve your relationship with money, no matter what, myself included.
Yeah, I love that answer. Versus a good relationship, bad relationship, always room for improvement relationship.
Yeah, just like a marriage, right? Like you can always be working on things, dating each other, getting to know each other deeper.
Absolutely. Personal growth in all areas. Yeah, food, nutrition, health, all the things. That's great. That's awesome. Well, let's dive in. We talked about going a couple directions with this, and you may be telling a little bit about your story, or we can talk a little bit about my story with money, and we can use this as, I don't know, maybe kind of a coaching session, so to speak, where individuals can listen to my experience of money over my lifetime. And sometimes I feel like we really learn from hearing someone else's story, because we can identify with it, or at least parts of it, or a piece of it. And then, whatever, wherever we go with that, they can take that away and implement it and or whatever that looks like in their life.
Yeah. And I think with money, just having awareness is a really good place to start with improving your relationship with money. So hearing your story or maybe my story or resonating with their own story, sometimes just having the awareness of, okay, this is where my relationship is and this is how I want to feel about money can be a really good starting point. So I love that.
All right. Well, let's go.
Okay.
So I'll start with, I'm going to give an overarching story of my relationship with money, where it started, where it's gone, where it is, what I'm working on. You interject at any point in time.
Okay.
Okay. So I grew up divorced home, parents, divorced. Neither of my parents came from very much money. I wouldn't say, it wasn't a poverty situation for either of them. There was, opportunity within the small community that my dad lived. My mom, had more of an experience. Her parents had come. My grandfather was a farm kid, and he ended up doing a couple of different things, got educated. I think he was one of the first in his family to get a college education. So when they divorced, my experience of money growing up was my dad went on to, I think he was the first professional in the first one to go to college in his family. And he actually went on, he got his degree as a PA, physician's assistant, decided he didn't want to do that. And so went back and got a dental, he got his, became a dentist. And that's what he did for 40 years. So I had this experience with my mom, who was a teacher. It was always a feeling of not having money. So always an energy of we don't have money. We need, when we go to the grocery store, we have a budget that we have to stick to. It was always a feeling of what's the word I'm looking for? Help me here. Scarcity. Versus on when I spent time with my dad, it was always, even if that was the case, maybe in the early years, it was never a feeling of that. So his relationship with money was always more of the opposite mindset. So I really had this division of the way that I felt about it. So at times I felt like it was scarcity, and at times I felt like it was very abundant. And so I went into my life based on both of those. I don't think I had a relationship with money. I had no compass. I didn't feel like I didn't have it. I didn't necessarily feel like I did have it. I didn't pay attention to it. So I would say I wasn't responsible with it either. When I had it, I'd spend it. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't spend it. And I've always had this kind of deep rooted belief that it's just money. And we can always find more of it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to add something. So I think that I love your story so far. It's very interesting. So I think that our relationship with money is our thoughts about it. The way that you think about it is your relationship. So when you were like, well, money is just money, that's why it reflected in you saying, well, if I had it, I'd spend it. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't spend it. I never really paid attention because money is just money. I can always make more of it. So that was your relationship because those were your thoughts about money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. So then as you get married, you marry another human that has another relationship with money. And we have 4 kids. I owned a company, a mortgage company, for a number of years. So I was making money. Husband was making money. Then I had a cancer diagnosis. So then I wasn't working. So that's when I would say that my attitude around money, relationship with money, I wouldn't say it shifted. I would say it was the same, but it started to become more stressful. So when responsibility came into my life, real responsibility, myself, I guess I never saw myself as a responsibility. If I'm only caring for myself, I'll find a way. But when you start having to care for other people and or be in a relationship with someone else, there's responsibility for both. And so money became a stress and was a stress for a while, long time.
Yeah. So this is a good point to stop too and ask, what do you think at that time you were believing about money or your ability to maybe make money, right? Because you couldn't work, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So what do you remember any of your thoughts around money at that time?
So I believe it now. Again, I'm going back and trying to put myself back at
Yeah.
a different time. And this has been 14 years ago. Um, my self-worth had always come from what I was able to do. So I
Mhm.
always felt like I could take care of myself no matter what.
Mhm.
I could, like I said, my relationship with money wasn't positive or negative. It was just if I needed to do something, I could go out and do it and make it happen. And I
Mhm.
became dependent.
Mhm.
And in becoming dependent, not only did it shift my relationship with money, it shifted my relationship with myself because
Mhm.
my identity had come from what I was able to do and not do instead of who I was. And
Yeah.
so that's where the shift became very negative. And so
Mhm.
I felt for the first time, I felt something different about money.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna point out what I heard just so the listeners can maybe resonate. There was a time when your belief was, "No matter what, I can take care of me, I can go make more money," and so there was, like, a certainty there.
Yeah.
That's what I was hearing as a certainty, and then when things changed, your circumstance changed, your thoughts also changed. You were like, "I'm dependent, I'm not able to go out and work, I have all of these people to, like, care for," and I don't know if you can hear it when I repeat it back to you, but I can almost hear, like, that would be more stressful, right? Than, like, "I can take
Yeah.
care of this, I got this no matter what, I can go make money." There's, like, a solid certainty
Yeah.
versus, like, it almost was like a mindset of like it wasn't in your control anymore. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, this was a long time ago. So,
Yeah. And I would
but
say that's true because not only was it, there was a time period where I couldn't because I was
mhm,
sick. So I didn't have the
mhm,
energy to do it. And then I entered into the time period of, okay, now I'm getting better. I'm feeling better. I have more energy. But we have 4 kids at home taking a lot of energy. I
mhm,
no longer had the mortgage company. So getting started again, where was I going to have the time and energy to start something again where I could take care of and make the kind of money I had made before? You
mhm,
know, it was essentially going from where I had been, dropping to nothing, and then not having the same ability in those moments to be able to go back to the place that I thought I
mhm,
needed to be. So instead of doing a little bit, it's almost like I completely flipped and thought, well, if I can't go here, then it's not worth doing it at all, which then
yeah,
is a cascade of, a lot of other things that went along with that. And there was a
yeah,
fear of, there was an association between how much I was doing prior to my cancer diagnosis and going back to doing that again, and that causing an illness again too.
mm. Yeah, and so with that, what I'm hearing is your relationship with yourself, right?
Mhm.
And our relationship with our money can reflect our relationship with ourself. Whether that's like what I see a lot with clients is like their usually it's like their relationship with work is very similar to their relationship with money. And that's kind of what I'm hearing here is like you had an expectation for yourself of what you could produce or how much money you could make or how maybe like productive, I'm using air
Yeah.
quotes, like productive you could be. And because that changed, your thoughts changed along with it. And I think that's maybe where that shift happened with your relationship with money, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. So then now we fast forward to, um, and the reason I tell part of the story, I think it's important for people to understand that one, it's never too late. It's
Hmm.
never too late in anything that you do to turn something around. So we're talking about money today. Somebody else, you could, take this same conversation and relate it to your relationship with food,
Hmm.
or
100%.
your relationship with your body and your health. I mean, you can really kind of take this to wherever you want to go. I think the longer that we ignore something that becomes a problem, the harder it gets to start taking care of that problem.
Hmm.
So what happened over the course of 14 years is I never in my mind had a perceived problem with money until
Hmm.
that point.
Hmm.
And at that point, I started to have a problem that I didn't know how to take care of. And because I had so many other things in my life, that was not my priority. You know, my priority was my health, the kids, my relationship with my husband. So money went all the way to the bottom of my priority list and stayed there. So then what ended up happening is that it actually ended up being the biggest problem in my life. So while I was trying to take care of everything else that I wanted to keep at bay, my health went from the biggest problem I had to actually now it's not, it's at the bottom, it's my best. And it flip-flopped. Now money is at the top of my mountain.
Yeah. Well, because you prioritized your health, right? And so we make progress on what we prioritize in our life always. And I think sometimes it can feel hard to like, there's so many things we could prioritize, right? So it's like, how do you prioritize kids and a marriage and your health and money and work, right? But if you prioritize you and how you're feeling about yourself and the way that you're thinking about things in general, I think that that can really help to work on all the areas of your life. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's great advice. And that's exactly over the last couple of years, that's exactly where I've started to find, if you want to, I always call it counterbalance, counterbalancing all the things are starting to equal out. Relationship, faith, money, you know, all of the things are starting to, you know, really, they're all on an equal level, essentially. Because I have taken the time for myself.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I love that because again, too, I think as humans, we see what the quote unquote problem is that's like very front and center. And we're like, oh my goodness, I need to take care of this problem. But I always like, for me personally, I always like to look inward and be like, okay, where can I work on myself? Instead of being like, I need to work on how I look or the money that I have or my relationship. It's like, what internally can I work on first? It doesn't mean that we don't change the external things that we want to change. We can still do that. But I always like to start internally of like, what do I have control over working on and improving on and growing in now internally? And I've found that how we do one thing is how we do a lot of things.
Yeah. And I've heard that so many times, you know, over my life, and you don't realize it until you realize it. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I think it's such an important part to hear that things don't really change in all areas of your life until you work on you. They don't. I can't tell you how many times I sat down and how many different advisors I met with and gave them all the details of all the things that, you know, we had and what I wanted to do. And we would set a budget. And then I would go to step forward and to, you know, implement that budget. And every single time things would shift every time.
100%.
And I did it many times over the years. And so I kept asking myself, what is it about this? You know, what is in the way of, and again, I addressed the problem instead of addressing, you know, what is it in me? I was always looking for what happened in my childhood that caused me to, you know, want to reject, you know, whatever it is that's keeping me from doing this thing. And it wasn't my childhood. It was my own personal development and growth that had to happen. And when that happened, the desire, that shift in my heart, everything changed. My desire to want to have better relationships that maybe weren't at, you know, as good as they could have been, or my desire to continue to seek out, you know, better health. But what's interesting about that one, and this, you know, I think this plays in too, is that we either neglect things because of our poor relationship with ourselves, and or we hyper focus on things because of our poor relationship with ourselves. And when I lost control of my perceived self-worth in how I performed in a job or making money, I took control of what I could take control of. Because ultimately, like you said, what I had lost was control. And so for me, I hyper focused on my health for a very, very long time.
Yeah. And I think I was always the person in the past that I would hyper focus on things. So I can resonate with you on that.
Yeah.
I didn't really avoid stuff. I was like hyper focused on doing better, being better, whatever.
Yeah.
But something that we always have control over, and this is another thing that you don't realize it till you realize it, but something you always have control over is your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like how you want to think about yourself, how you want to think about the situation. And we know that this is true because something similar could happen to two different people and they could feel completely different about it.
Yep. Yep.
And I think, and you had mentioned earlier that the longer we avoid something, the harder it is to kind of fix it. And the reason that that happens is because the longer you have thoughts about a certain thing, the longer you have maybe like negative thoughts or not so great thoughts about money, for example, the more your brain believes those thoughts, the more evidence you find, the more you've practiced believing it. And so when you go to change it, now you're kind of, they call it like a neural pathway. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Within your brain.
Neuroplasticity. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, literally. So the more you practice a thought, it's like you're kind of digging a deeper groove in your brain to believe that thought.
Yeah.
So you always have control over the way that you think, but the longer you believe something, the more intentional you're going to have to be about believing something new. So it can start to feel kind of harder.
Yeah.
But you always have control over your thoughts. So that's something I want to offer to everyone. If right now there's certain thoughts you have about yourself or your money or your spouse, you actually have control over those thoughts more than your brain lets you think that you do.
I love that. I love that. That's been the season of life I've been in the last couple of years, and it's pretty amazing. And it's kind of a, okay, I'm not going to drop the F-bomb. I've done it before, but I'm not going to drop the F-bomb. But it's kind of a mind F, right?
Yeah.
Because it is, if you're in a relationship with someone, it's easy to want to say, well, it's their fault. They treated me like this. They did this to me. Well, this is why I am the way I am. The same with money, right? I want to say, I want to look back on my childhood, or I want to look back on my past, and I want to say, this is why I am the way I am today. And it's not. It is and it's not. It started with an event. And then instead of taking control over that event with my mind and my thoughts and the way I dealt with it, I just continued down the pathway of really making a very deep groove in my brain.
Yeah. And that's the human, there's nothing wrong with anyone that has done that. I've done it. You've done it. Everyone's done it, because that's how our brain works. Our brain's like, let me learn this new thing.
Yeah.
Our brain is always absorbing information. And especially at a young age, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but I think they say between the ages of like 5 and 9, around there, is when we're really like absorbing a lot of new thoughts and beliefs. And so if you're like 8 or 9 and you hear your parents constantly saying like, we have no money, or I had a client recently that was like, well, when I was, in elementary school, my parents were always telling me that money's the root of all evil. Right. And so at that age, you look to your parents to teach you things. And that's when your brain is like absorbing the most information. So to your point, yes, the past does play a role, and you still have control within your mindset now to start changing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about what that might look like for people, because I know even in, and I keep going back to like weight loss, and I could say health, but weight loss, I think, is easier for people to grasp. If I talk about having had cancer or a diagnosis, not everyone has had that, but many people have issues with kind of a yo-yo of 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever it is. So when we talk about weight, real solutions aren't quick fixes. So there are things you could offer, like, just today, set your mind to the idea that you're going to make changes, and then make a budget and follow your budget. Well, I can tell you personally, that is not, it doesn't work. It might work for a small percentage of people. And I don't believe it actually works because of the consistency of them following it. I think the reason that they choose to do it and are consistent and it works is because they are further along here somehow than I am. And and this wouldn't necessarily be for me today, but if you had said this to me 4 years ago, I couldn't have done it because I had no idea what I didn't know. So I needed something more tangible, more along the lines of a neuroplasticity type.
Yeah. And the budget, that resonates a lot with my story because I had $60,000 of debt. I think I was like 21 or 22 when I had this amount of debt. And I just kept budgeting and rebudget. Like I would make a budget like 6 times a month, like not even exaggerating. Like I would like, I just have to write my numbers down one more time. That's going to be it. It's going to help me. And then I wouldn't follow it or I'd get stressed out or something would change. I was also like living by myself. I was fresh
Yeah.
out of college. So, things would come up and I'd
Yeah.
have a new bill that I didn't account for. And so what I noticed with budgets, it's good to have a plan. Plans are helpful, but plans are not the solution to
Mhm.
whatever's happening internally,
Yeah.
right? Making a plan is not a solution to you improving your relationship with yourself. So that's probably why the budget didn't work for you, and it doesn't necessarily work for a lot of people. It didn't work for me either.
Mhm.
So if you're out there and you're budgeting, it can be helpful, but the budget is not the thing that's going to just be an easy, quick solution. The same way that like if you are wanting to lose 10 pounds and you're like, okay, I'm going to run 10 miles today, you're not going to just like lose 10 pounds in one day.
Yeah.
And if you do, then that's not good. We need to
Right.
not do that. Not good. So, so something more tangible as far as like the mindset piece of it is I always love to say like getting intimate with your money.
Okay. Tell me more.
Yes. So let me give a comparison. So like if you're dating someone and you just you go out to date, you go on dates, you go out to dinner and you just kind of like sit there, maybe you talk about the food, it's pretty good. Yeah,
Mhm.
like your shirt. And it's just very like surface level. You're not really getting to know that person. You're not necessarily getting a chance to like fall in love with who they are. But if you're like having deep conversations and you're like meeting their family and you're spending lots of time together and you're talking about your future together and children and like
Yeah.
your religion, like deep things, intimate things, you're going to typically feel more connected with someone, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it's kind of the same with our money. I feel like the budget is like the surface level, like, let me just go on a date with this person. Let me just check the box of making a budget.
Yep.
But like getting to know your money and being intimate, meaning pull up your bank account and look at your bank account and think thoughts like this is okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like for example, I have clients who don't like to look at their bank account because they're like, I should have more money saved. Right? Like maybe that's their thought. But if you open your bank account and you're like, okay, this is how much money I have saved, and that's okay. Like that could just be one little step is you're starting to accept where you are now. That doesn't mean we have to stay there, but you want to be in acceptance with your situation. I feel like in order to be able to change it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's finding, because so let me describe this to you. So I could do that. I actually look at our bank account every day. And I actually could feel like no matter what I see, I could feel like it's okay, even if it's not okay. Right? So how then do you create a reality around what it is if you are someone like me that I tend not to go down a negative road because that feels out of control to me. So my positive attitude in looking at anything comes from this idea that, well, it's not that bad. Like it's okay.
Yeah. Well, because I think when you believe, so think about the difference. If you're like, I don't have enough money, there's like a panic, it's out of your control versus, okay, this is how much money I have.
Yeah.
Maybe this is how much I need. What is in my control? And then you start to give yourself options.
Yeah.
When we have options, that's in our control. And there's always options. I would say for the most part, obviously, I'm sure there's certain situations where there's like no options. Sure, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that for the most part, you can look at something and give yourself options. I'm not saying you're going to always love all of the options.
Right.
But even just we're taking one bite out of the elephant at a time, one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what options do I have right now? Versus just being like, I don't have the money, or I was irresponsible, or I shouldn't have bought that. That's going to take you down a whole panic road, which makes us want to avoid looking at it altogether. Or just like.
So what I think about when you say that is I think part of the reason that up until a certain point a couple of years ago or even a year ago, I was unwilling I would look at pieces, but I was unwilling to look at the complete picture and talk about it
Mm-hmm.
because of the shame.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
had let the shame build behind what I hadn't done or what I had done that wasn't at
Mm-hmm.
a certain level of expectation. And that shame became so great that I was unwilling to go far enough in, because the
Mm-hmm.
further in I went, the more shame I felt.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So in a situation like that, I would say if this was like your current reality, what I would say is like, let's look at your thoughts about money. Like,
Yeah.
because shame is created from your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
It's not just like, this is my financial situation and it equals shame. I think
Right.
a lot of times we think of it like that, like, oh, like for me, I was like, I have $60,000 of debt. I'm irresponsible. Like I was
Yeah.
making debt equal being irresponsible, when in reality, debt was just debt. And then there was my thoughts about myself.
Hmm.
And then there was my guilt and shame and judgment of myself for having that debt, versus giving myself permission to be like, okay, how else can I think about this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what action steps can I do?
Yes. Yeah. You give
Yeah.
yourself options, but I like to look at, so like I have one client and she would resonate with this. She had a lot of shame coming into coaching around her debt. And as we started to talk about the debt, her thoughts were similar. Like I shouldn't have used my credit card for this. Like I made a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about it, we came to the conclusion that she used her credit cards to help pay for her daughter's wedding.
Hmm.
Right. And it's like, when you take a step back and you look at your own reasoning for certain things, I think sometimes we can find compassion for ourselves too.
Right.
And compassion is a great start to acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you're resistant and you're judging yourself,
Yeah.
it's not helpful. It's
Right.
like the natural thing to do, but it's not necessarily helpful
Right.
either.
Right. So in your coaching and the things that you do when you work with people, where do you start? So when somebody comes in, obviously you're probably going to, have them share their story, because
Mm-hmm.
you need to know where their mindset's at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you go from there? What does your
Yeah.
system look like to help you know where to start with each individual person?
Yeah. So this is something that all the listeners could do literally right now. So the first couple of things that I always like to do is first look at what your goals are. And it's a little different than just being like, my goal is to pay off $60,000 of debt. That was
Yeah.
my personal goal. That was one of my personal goals. But I like to look at it like, how do I want to feel? How do you want to feel with your money on a day to day? How do you want to feel when you spend money? How do you want to feel when the debt's paid off? I like to look at, how do we want to feel around things before we take action. I think it's important because, again, if we're panicked, if we're feeling judgmental, our actions are going to look a lot different
Yeah.
than if we're feeling confident and calm and in control. Our actions are going to be extremely different.
Right.
I think now my brain just wants like my dog. Like if my dog gets scared, she like jumps and runs away.
Yeah.
But if she's
Yeah.
like feeling comfortable, she'll like lay down and like lick my leg or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same for humans. It really is. So look at your goals, but also look at, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? And then I like to look at, what would you be believing about yourself to feel that way?
Hmm.
Like, let's just tap into so for me, it was, I want to pay off debt. The feeling I really wanted, I wanted to feel free.
Yeah.
I wanted to just like feel like a freedom.
Yeah.
I think it was also like a bit of like a peace. Like I wanted to feel at peace and free. And when I would think about, okay, well, what would I be thinking about myself to feel free? It's like, I'm in control of this, right? Like,
Mm.
I'm okay. I'm in control. Like I have lots of options, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing there is we're starting to tap into like the thoughts that you want to start believing. Now, I don't necessarily say that typically on a coaching session. I'm just asking them so that they can so that you guys can all start to really look at, how do I want to feel with money? How would I have to think about myself to tap into that feeling? And that's always like the very first activity we do together.
Yeah. So when you look at, and maybe you haven't, so you might have to go into a place to think about this. When you look at the United States, and you look at, Americans and the way that we view money versus, many other countries' views of money, what would you say is the biggest, what's a word that I want to use? Hurdle, maybe, of, our relationship with money here in the United States?
So that I'm going to think on that. I've had one client in another country. So I live in Florida, so I've had lots like different states, but I've had one client from another country, and they had very similar things, like thoughts around debt, thoughts around credit cards, thoughts around how much they should be making or saving. So it was very similar. I would say maybe a difference, I don't know if this is like a hurdle or not, a difference, I think sometimes with like certain cultures, maybe certain thoughts are more practiced around money.
Okay.
Like in their specific culture, it was very much like women don't work, the man will take care of you.
Okay. Yeah.
And his wife, she actually would get on the calls with us. She's like, I want to work. I want to have my own business. Like, cause she's like, it's like a new age.
Yeah.
So I know that's not necessarily a hurdle here. For some people, it might be, depending on how they were raised. But I think that actually, just my 2 cents is that like we actually have lots of options here too, like a lot of options.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thought that everybody could kind of decide to start believing, is like there is a lot of options. Again, we may not always love every option.
Right.
There are a lot of options of ways to make money, gain money, different bank accounts that you can open. That was like one thing too. Like there was only certain bank accounts that they could open. So like we have lots of options here. As far as like hurdles, I don't know. I think I want to say it's similar.
Yeah.
Just from the experience I had with one client they actually lived in Dubai.
Okay.
So
it'd be an interesting, study.
It would be.
Because I've thought a lot about, I've worked with a lot with the Latino culture over the years. And in particular, when I owned my mortgage company, it was called Tu Casa Mortgage. And I, predominantly worked with the community. And one of the things, I've lived in South America, I lived in Uruguay for a while. I've lived in Costa Rica. And I've lived in a number of places also. And what I saw culturally, and I don't know that the attitude of money, I don't know the answer to this, but what I saw culturally, and I see often even still here in this country with the culture, is family first and taking care of each other. Excuse me, taking care of each other.
Yeah.
And less of, I'm not saying they don't worry about it. I'm not saying that it isn't an issue. Like we don't have similarities, but I think about retirement, for example, and this is a perspective I have. This is not necessarily based on anything other than just what I see, right? I see in the United States, and what I've said from a very young age that's bothersome to me, is that we work to save. If we don't have money saved, if we aren't investing, if we don't have a huge nest egg for retirement at the age of 65, we've failed. And on top of that, most of our society, not all, most of our society, our children believe that we are responsible at the age, we're responsible for doing all of that. So we're responsible for caring for them up until the age of 18. We're responsible for paying for their education. And this isn't everyone, but this is sort of an overall attitude. And then they go off on their own and do their thing. And at the age when really, we hit 50, and it's sort of like, it's a curve, right? So we're up, and then we hit 50 and we start to go, right? And nobody's taking care of us on our last, on those last years, when really in other cultures, that's when people come in and they take care of, the parents or the grandparents. And that, to me, there's an additional stress. There's an additional benchmark that we're constantly striving for. And, retiring at 65, more power to the, people that retire early, but there's so much to be done in the world. Like,
Mhm.
why are we retiring at an age and just traveling? Why are we not working, all of us working more on world, and lots of people do, but why are we not working more on world problems
Mm.
and, taking care of each other? And so that to me is a hurdle. When I look
Mhm.
at our culture versus some other cultures, I would say that family needs to be more involved. We need to care for
Mhm.
each other always,
Yeah.
and look out for each other, and
Mhm.
not put our parents in homes. If they want to do that, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are definitely people here that have that
Yes, for sure.
mindset too. Like
Yes.
I just think about like even like my mom's parents were like from Italy, like moved here from Italy like however
Uh-huh.
many, years ago. My mom didn't speak English till she was like 7 years old. But like I was always used to like having my grandmother on my mom's side come live with us for like 3 or 4 months out of the year. Right. And then she would
Yeah.
go live with like one of her other siblings. So I think it just really depends again on your specific unique culture from the household maybe that you were raised in. But I
Yeah.
do think something that you said of like work, 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 I definitely know that that is a thing of like work more. It starts with elementary school. And I actually went to school to be an elementary school teacher. So I'm technically a certified teacher. So I've seen this firsthand. I don't teach though. I just do the coaching full time.
Well, you do
But
teach. A coach is a
yes,
teacher. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't teach first graders.
Yeah.
um, but like it's like get a good grade, pass your test, do your homework,
Hmm.
show up on time, leave in the bell. So from a young age, we're kind of like it's almost I'm not like hustle coach culture, but kind of from a young age, we're like on to the next thing, get a better grade,
Yeah.
do better, run faster in gym class. Like so I think from a young age, we're kind of conditioned to just keep working, 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 working for the next goal. And I
Yeah.
think that can show up with our
Performance.
money.
Yeah.
Yes. Like we
Performance
need to
driven.
save more. We need to do this. Like, oh, like I see this a lot. Like, oh, like once I pay off my debt, like everything will be great. Then they pay off their debt and they're like, oh, once I save, I'll be
Mm,
great. And then they
mm.
save and they're like, oh, well, once I buy a house. Right. And so I think that's kind of the condition here
Yeah.
is like, what's the next thing
Yeah.
I need
Instead
to
of
achieve?
being present in and or grateful for
Hmm.
the place that you're at and the moment you're at.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you've accomplished so far because you
Yeah.
can't pay off $60,000 of debt until you've paid off $5,000 of debt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
we kind of
true.
overlook that
Yeah.
sometimes, or at least I did. This is from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
So,
And I would say the same. I would say that, it's similar to, again, I'm going back to weight loss, but it's similar to,
mhm.
if I have 50 pounds to lose, you're not going to celebrate 2 pounds because you're going to
Mm,
think, well, I mean, I could easily put back on 2 pounds, right?
yes,
So $60,000 in debt, you pay off 2,000. It's hard to celebrate 2,000 because we know how easy it is to spend 2,000 more.
yes. I think celebrating your wins is one of the most impactful things you can do for yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I have you. Can I mention the name of the book on here or no?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There's a book called The Gap in the Gain.
Okay. Bye. Do you know
Recommend
who it's
it.
by?
Good question. I don't know. I have to
That's
look on
okay.
that. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. The
You
gap
could
in the
it's
game. Okay.
The Gap in the Gain.
Okay.
And essentially they talk about in the book, and they've done like studies on it too,
Yeah.
that we have a goal. So if the goal is to pay off $60,000 of debt or lose 50 pounds, as humans, we always want to focus on the gap, meaning
Mm,
what more we need to do to get to this bigger goal. But when you focus on the gain, meaning the progress that you've already made,
yeah.
it like increases your motivation and increases your confidence, right?
Mm,
Because when you're like, wow, like I've already paid off $2,000, I did that so fast, it was easier than I thought it would
yeah.
be, or right when we have those types of thoughts and we're celebrating ourselves, it's much more motivating than, oh, I still have $58,000 to go, it's going to take me
Yeah.
forever, right? So it's kind of back to like that mindset of how do you want to think about your goal, your relationship with your goal.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's a great way as we kind of move into the end of the episode. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a great, great book, great suggestion, The Gap in the Gain, because you're right. We get stuck in this idea that, oh my gosh, I have to go from here to here. I'm never going to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Instead of just taking those small steps, celebrating.
Yeah.
And you're right. Motivation, I mean, in everything you'll ever read, we cannot maintain motivation. We can't. But we can, with commitment continue
yes.
to make the steps that we need to make to get to the places that we want to go.
Yeah.
So,
and right. And when you're celebrating each step of the way, you're going to give yourself little boosts of motivation along the way too. And I this is a kind of a silly example, but I witnessed this. We were just on vacation with like my husband's whole family. There's a lot of little kids, and one of the babies, she like started walking, and like she stood up, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, right? Like we're like celebrating her standing up.
Yeah.
But like you and I, we walk around every day and we act like it's no big deal. But at one point, it was a goal.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago, it was a goal to stand up and walk. But it's like, if I have a 1-year-old and she's not walking, and I'm like, why aren't you walking yet? You should be walking by now. Just imagine. We would never do that. Yeah. So it's like, let's treat ourselves how you would treat your little you. Treat you now how you would treat little you.
I love that. And even, I would say, even go as far as to, you pay off $500, make a note card, and, do your celebration, take yourself out for ice cream. Don't go spend $500, right? But do something, and then put that note card up that says, on this date at this time, I paid off my first $500, and then put your next 500 and your next 500. And then all of a sudden that does become the motivation for your commitment to keep going, because you can see, oh my gosh, I've got 8 cards up there. I've paid off 4,000, another 8 cards, and I'm going to pay off 8,000, right? Or whatever that looks like. I'm just giving
100%. I love it. Another exercise I always just have clients do, or I do it myself, is like, think about 5 or 10 goals that you've wanted to accomplish that you've already accomplished.
Yeah.
And write them down and celebrate. Because there was a time when you really wanted to start a business, or to get a promotion, or to have a baby, or to whatever it is for you. There was a time where you really wanted that. And if you already have it now, take a minute and like write down 5 or 10 things, and just be in the celebration of having something that you wanted.
That's awesome. Yeah. If you're somebody that does a vision board, I did this a couple of months ago. I went back through the last 5 vision boards over the last 5 years. And I looked at the things that I consistently, I was putting similar things, not realizing it. And then what things have been realized because I kept putting those things on the board. So recognizing the wins in your life. I love it. I love it. Okay. So where can we find you? Do you have any upcoming, so you do one-on-one coaching? Do you do group coaching? And where can we find you, or where can the listeners find you?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Money Coach Mariah. I go live on there. I do stories. I just share client wins. I go live with my clients sometimes. So we have fun over there. And then I also have a free training that's out right now. So if you follow me on Instagram and just send me a message, I will send you my free training. And just connect with me on there.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. I hope that, I hope it's been a blessing to somebody out there listening. I know it has been to me. I mean, even just the reminder to myself, a lot of times I'm a verbal processor. So a lot of times just in my own talking, things, are coming to me. So I love the idea of, and I've never done it, of taking the note cards and putting them up and getting excited about the wins. Because then you're visually, for me, I'm visual. So I like to see it every day. So
I'm the same. I love to visualize things, talk about things. I am right there with you.
Yeah. And I'm excited to get the book. I think that'll be
such a good book.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I also want to thank the listeners today. Thank you for joining us. We're here every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Aging Like a Badass. Have a great week. This is Kimberly Price, your 40-something host of Aging Like a Badass. See you every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4WN Radio, as we come together to break the rules, ignore the critics, and age like a badass.